Welcome back to Just One Question. This is Nilakshi Sengupta, and I have with me today, once again, answering a new question, Brian Tellis. Brian has spent years hosting events, doing radio shows, performing, singing in his band, and of course, acting on stage. And all of them need a considerable amount of interaction. And quite a bit of that may not even have a script. Hey Brian, I'm really curious to know about the process of preparing for the various mediums you work in. How does the performer in you prep?
So there are different ways of prepping depending on what the task at hand is, but I'll start with theatre, which is really the nucleus of what we're chatting about. It's an old way of prepping, but I swear by it. So let's take Sing India Sing for instance, where I played a recovering alcoholic, a recovering singer now, a music trainer, a fun guy. I actually created in my mind, of course in conjunction with the writers, I created a whole character for Rocky Singh from his early days, his growing up years to where he is. So obviously you provide a context for the character, a past context for the character. It helps you kind of understand who the character was or who I was as the character as a young, teenage boy, depending of course on the age of the character, and what are the circumstances that have driven me to be who I am today. It's an age-old technique used, but I find it extremely fruitful.
And you go back to this backstory every time when you're on stage?
So every time you're on stage, all you need is a few seconds to think about your past and get into the character, and then when you step on stage you kind of hopefully seamlessly get into being Rocky Singh. And that is really, besides of course the training, I'm actually a little out of touch with theatre, so for me it takes a lot more.
Okay.
So in the case of, let's say, Sing India Sing, a lot of vocal training, a lot of eating and behaving right, saving yourself from potential speed breakers and the likes. You have got to be pretty disciplined to actually come out onto stage and do justice to expectations. So this is broadly the canvas for theatre.
And is there anything else that can help while you are at the rehearsal stage maybe?
Also, spending time with other characters has helped me, both as people and as characters. It really helps. It helps repartee. It helps saying things that are never spoken out to each other, because it's so much about the vibe between characters and audience. And of course the spoken word is critical, or the sung lyric is critical, but a lot of communication has to do with just body language between actors on stage and between actors and the audience. So spending time with characters, getting comfortable with them both on a personal and professional level as characters is critical, I feel, and that works for me perfectly.
That's when you have a scripted narrative to perform to, right? What happens when you're singing or you are on radio? That prep would be quite different, isn't it?
As a singer or as a radio host, I think another thing that's irreplaceable in homework is knowledge. So let's say radio for instance, it's one thing to just go out there and say what's meant to be technically said. But the more domain knowledge you have, the more specific knowledge you have to the music you're playing or to the topic you're speaking on, it just helps you be a lot more convincing, a lot more convicted firstly, and as a consequence more convincing. And obviously if both these come into play, then you've got a great story going. So broadly these are the prep measures that I take for sure.
Makes a huge difference to be aware, to have practiced well before facing the audience, or the mic for that matter. These are informations that our audience, I'm sure, will be happy to learn. Thanks so much, Brian. And that was one more episode with Brian Tellis, where he shared some gems about how he prepares to perform. More soon. But now it's time for me to take your leave. This is Neelakshi Sengupta, and you were listening to Just One Question. Do tune in for more.